Welcome back to Echoes of War, the channel where history comes alive through the stories that shaped our world. From legendary battles and forgotten conflicts to the decisions that changed the course of humanity, we take you beyond the headlines and into the heart of history. On October 6, 1973, Israelis observing the solemn holiday of Yom Kippur are suddenly stunned by reports of a surprise two-front assault in the Sinai Peninsula and the Golan Heights. Egypt and Syria, still bitter from their crushing defeat in the 1967 Six-Day War, shatter Israeli defensive lines. For a moment, it appears the very existence of the Israeli state could be in jeopardy. As Israeli tank crews improvise desperate defenses and reservists race toward the front, Israel's leaders grapple with how such a massive surprise was possible. Since the 1967 war, Israel had held expanded borders along the Suez Canal in Sinai and the strategically vital Golan Heights, bordering Syria, Lebanon, and Jordan. In the aftermath, Egypt, Syria, and Jordan refused to recognize Israel, while Palestinian militant groups continued launching raids from neighboring territories. Egyptian President Gamal Abdel Nasser offered to resign after the 1967 debacle, but massive public pressure forced him to stay. He recognized Egypt could not defeat Israel outright, yet believed limited military pressure could challenge the occupation of Sinai. In 1969, Nasser declared, "The first priority is the military front. For we must realize that the enemy will not withdraw unless we force him to withdraw through fighting." The result was the War of Attrition from 1967 to 1970. Egyptian and Israeli forces clashed in air, naval, and commando operations across the Suez Canal. The fighting remained mostly low-level, with each side accusing the other of violating the 1967 ceasefire. For many Israeli civilians, who were often reservists, war and daily life remained intertwined. Pediatrician and reservist Dr. Itzhak Brook remembered learning to identify bombing runs by the sound of jet engines. The War of Attrition led both sides to heavily fortify their positions. Israel built the Bar Lev Line along the eastern bank of the canal. Massive sand barriers, strings of fortifications, anti-tank ditches, and concealed firing ramps. Israel's arsenal was a mix of American, British, and captured Soviet equipment. Older weapons were modernized, but the variety created logistical headaches. With a small population, Israel relied on rapid mobilization and air power. Some Israeli commanders, including Ariel Sharon, criticized the Bar Lev Line as too static and vulnerable to a major Egyptian assault backed by artillery. Others trusted intelligence to provide early warning for preemptive strikes. In September 1970, Nasser died and was succeeded by Anwar Sadat. Like Syria's new leader Hafez al-Assad, Sadat was determined to reclaim lost territory and erase the shame of 1967. Both leaders benefited from lessons of the Attrition War, deeper knowledge of Israeli tactics, and fresh Soviet weaponry, including advanced SAM anti-aircraft missiles, rocket artillery, and the deadly Sagger anti-tank guided missile. Egypt and Syria reformed their officer corps and improved troop training. However, Egyptian Chief of Staff Saad el-Shazli understood they could not seize all of Sinai. Their air forces remained weaker than Israel's experienced squadrons. The Arab plan was to launch a rapid advance, dig in, repel Israeli counterattacks under SAM cover, and negotiate from strength. The SAM batteries would be key, but they were static. Syria planned a similar limited offensive in the challenging Golan terrain, where armored units would be forced through narrow crossing points. Israel observed the Arab buildup but interpreted it as defensive posturing. Prime Minister Golda Meir maintained that Israel held an unbeatable military edge. Egypt and Syria chose Yom Kippur, October 6th, for the attack. Strict secrecy meant many Israeli commanders still doubted reports of an imminent assault even as it began. At 2 p.m., 240 Egyptian aircraft struck Israeli positions in Sinai. Simultaneously, 4,000 commandos crossed the Suez Canal under a massive artillery barrage. Using high-pressure water cannons to breach the sand walls, Egyptian forces poured across. Within 2 hours, 23,000 troops were on the East Bank. Israeli air and armored counterattacks were savaged by Sagger teams and SAMs. Only Fort Budapest held out. Its commander described the precise, doctrine-perfect Egyptian assault with smoke screens, tanks, and infantry working in tight coordination. At the same moment, Syrian forces attacked on the Golan. 3 infantry divisions and 2 armored divisions pushed toward the Purple Line, struggling to deploy bridges under heavy Israeli fire. Syrian commandos seized the Mount Hermon observation post, but their armored columns suffered heavy losses from Israeli tanks targeting bridging equipment first. By nightfall on October 6th, Israel had lost roughly 2/3 of its forward forces on the Bar Lev Line and half its tanks in Sinai. The Sagger missile proved devastatingly effective. The Israeli government initially feared a fight for national survival. Reservists mobilized en masse. One soldier recalled leaving civilian life behind for the desert and war. Israel prioritized the Syrian threat to its heartland but continued offensive-minded defense on both fronts, suffering painful tank losses. The 7th Armored Brigade famously held the Valley of Tears against overwhelming odds for 4 days. Syrian night vision advantages hurt the Israelis after dark. By October 9th, Israeli reservists were arriving in growing numbers. Syrian advances slowed, and Israeli jets began striking supply lines outside SAM coverage. On October 10th, Israel launched a counterattack toward Quneitra that succeeded against the more disorganized Syrian forces. With the situation stabilizing, Israel turned to the United States for urgent resupply. After internal debate, President Nixon authorized a major airlift. A coalition of Arab states, including Iraq, Jordan, and Saudi Arabia, rushed forces to support Syria. Israeli morale rebounded as they pushed deeper into Syrian territory. Egyptian commanders debated a second offensive to relieve pressure on Syria. Despite Shazli's warnings, Sadat ordered attacks toward the Mitla and Gidi passes on October 14th. The resulting tank battle, among the largest since World War II, saw Egyptian forces suffer heavy losses once they moved beyond their SAM umbrella. Israel employed new American anti-tank missiles. Israeli commanders spotted a critical gap near Bitter Lake. On October 15th, forces pushed through the Chinese farm in fierce fighting and began crossing to the west bank of the Suez Canal. Sharon's troops created havoc in the Egyptian rear, destroying SAM sites and supply depots. Egypt initially underestimated the scale of the crossing. With Egyptian forces threatened with encirclement, Sadat accepted a ceasefire on October 22nd. Assad reluctantly followed. Israel continued limited operations to improve its position before finally observing the ceasefire on October 25th. The war ended with Israel holding new territory west of the Suez and in the Bashan region, while Egypt retained gains in eastern Sinai. 52 Israel's intelligence failure stemmed largely from the concept. The firm belief that Egypt would not attack without clear superiority and that Syria would not move without Egypt. Contrary warnings from King Hussein and spy Ashraf Marwan were downplayed. Egypt and Syria cleverly used deception, public moderation, and regional crises to mask their preparations. Mobilization was delayed until the last moment for political reasons. Casualties were heavy. Israel lost up to 2,800 killed, Egypt around 15,000, and Syria about 3,500. Other nations joined the Arab side, but the war remained primarily Egyptian-Syrian. Both sides claimed victory. Egypt and Syria restored Arab pride after 1967. Israel, despite the initial shock, had ultimately turned the tide, but at great cost. Golda Meir resigned in 1974 amid criticism. Egypt gradually shifted toward diplomacy and closer ties with the United States, while Syria continued low-level conflict. The Palestinian issue remained unresolved, and the region stayed tense. The war also highlighted nuclear anxieties. Multiple accounts suggest Israel considered nuclear options in the darkest hours, reminders of Cold War strategic thinking.